we're halfway through the year. How many books have you read so far? Hi friends and readers. I actually can't believe I'm saying that we're halfway through the year. We are approaching July as I'm filming this, and this will be posted after July has already started, which means 6 months of the year already down. As a reader girly who works 40 hours a week full time, I set myself a 70 book reading goal for the entire year, which theoretically means if I want to keep pace to finish by the end of the year, that I would need to have read 35 books so far. So a big drum roll please on how many books I've currently read up until now, which today is June 29th. That's 43 books so far. So I am on pace. I am more than ahead of pace to reach the 70 goal, and I'm super excited about this. I feel like I have been so happy with what I've read this year, whether I've mood read for challenges. It's just fun to read. I'm really honing into my genre preferences, which are literary, contemporary fiction, adult romance, adult fantasy, adult romantasy. I think those are the highlights. And I preface that by saying I read genres that I enjoy. I also read genres that are out of my comfort. And sometimes those genres that I read out of my comfort might mean that my personal rating of them is lower. So we're gonna go through the books that I've read so far this year, talk about my least favorite from each month and my most favorite from each month. I really wanna do this for some conversation between me, you, whomever, because reading's fun, but reading is also very subjective. So keep that in mind. So when I say my least favorite book of the month, that really just means for my personal preference. It's usually because it wasn't a genre that I favor or usually have a fabulous time reading. Maybe I read it because of a reading challenge. Does not mean that that is a bad book. I could never write a book in my life, so I can't say that a book was bad or that writing's bad. It's just not in me. It is so creative to have a book out there. It just might not be my favorite book. And if one of my least favorites is one of your favorites, tell me why it was your favorite. Let's get into it with January's readings. All right, I'm gonna be a little bit off-centered from the camera, middle point of the camera, so that way I can put up the books that I read each month here so you can see what I was picking from and what all I read that month. And then also I've got my laptop here so I can see all the books that I read that month. Starting off with January, it feels like that was so long ago, 6 months ago. I don't even really remember this month all that much, except for that I had bangs and clearly don't have bangs now, or at least have tucked them back up. I read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 books in January. We'll start out with my least favorite book of that month, and that was A Little Life. If you know anything about A Little Life, you know that this is a behemoth of a book. Not only is it a very, very long and large book, the pacing to me was just pretty slow. This book is so heavy, so traumatic, so many trigger warnings, so much grief. You have got to be in the right headspace for this book. I think I gave it like a 3 stars simply for the fact that it put me into the most massive reading hole I've ever been put into by a book. I did enjoy the story and all the roommates and the friends that we followed in that. It was just so heavy, and for that, amongst the other ones I read, I had to write it as my least favorite. Make sure you check the trigger warnings before going into that book. And then my most favorite for January of this lineup would have to be the final book in the trilogy of Beartown. That is going to be called The Winners. Again, this book was also heavy and had lots of trauma and very emotional. I would say it's my favorite of the 3 because it's just a culmination of a series that you read in Beartown. You get to finish out all the characters' stories, know where they end up, know what happened to them. And for me, The Winners and even the Beartown series in general, at first when I started the series, I was a little bit worried that it had the point of view of young men, and that point of view wasn't always the prettiest. It was kind of grotesque, and I didn't really like being in the head of a boy in middle school and high school. But then as you got to know the characters, I started to fall in love with Beartown and the people, some of the people at least, and I liked seeing that come to an end in the final book. That final book was the weirdest 5-star I've ever given. If you've read the series, you might know why I say that. I'm still so conflicted by that 5 stars, but overall, I'm so glad I read the series. And then just some notable reads. I read The Women, another Kristen Hanna book, which would always recommend a Kristen Hanna book. And then also Remarkably Bright Creatures. I did really enjoy that one as well, and now it's a movie on Netflix, so I still need to watch that movie. Now we're jumping into February. Looking at my lineup from February, it is a very interesting lineup. We've got romance in here, we've got sports romance in here, Western romance, and then we've got fiction and science fiction. February was definitely a month where I tried out some reading challenges and thus resulted these books. We're gonna say that my least favorite from February was Butcher and Blackbird. And I know. Butcher and Blackbird is one of those things that you've really got to check what genre this falls under and whether or not you want to read in that genre. It is romance, but it is dark romance. And there are certainly some aspects, as someone who has read hardly any dark romance, in fact, that might have been the first one, that you've got to want to read about, or else you're going to be caught off guard and you might not enjoy it. I feel like I ended up giving this book like a 3-star. It is the first book in a series. I think it's called the Ruinous Love series. I really need help and convincing to finish this series. I just don't know if it's for me. My favorite from February was probably anyone else's favorite that you watch on the internet. I saw this book everywhere, so many recommendations to read it in the fiction genre, and I'm so glad that I did. It's The Correspondent by Virginia Evans. This book, when I say I like fiction, is right up my alley. We are following characters through correspondence. There is our main character who is writing in nothing but letters. So the entire novel is just a bunch of letters, and because of that, it's so fast-paced. You want to just keep reading to each letter, and honestly, it was kind of one of those shorter ones that just kept going. You just wanted to keep reading about their stories. And if you're someone who likes plot-driven or character-driven fiction, this is a good one for you. And honestly, it had such a sweet sentiment about growing old and what it looks like for certain people. I've also seen so many creators out there who've picked up The Correspondent and then said that they wish that they would lean back into writing letters, and I agree with that. I think it's beautiful and something to take from a book like this. Also, some notable things in here. I read Project Hail Mary in preparation for going to watch the movie in March, so I read it before I watched the movie, and I'm really glad I did. I also got my boyfriend to read it, which was exciting. I finished a very long hockey or sports romance series in Rewinded Back, started a Western romance series, and kept reading in another sports romance series. Oh, and Jennette McCurdy's first book aside from their memoir. What a month for reading. Ooh, now we're in March, and looking at my reads for March, I had a really good month in that I had 2 5 stars in the month of March. But first, let's talk about my least favorite book, and so far I can say this is my least favorite book of the year in general for the whole 6 months, and that is Call It What You Want. I don't even know what it was about this book, and if you've read it and felt differently, please let me know. My coworker had even read it and enjoyed it, but she had also read it a few years ago back when she was in college. And that was my biggest gripe about this book, is it felt very, very tropey in that there was so much miscommunication. When people say that on the internet about romance books, I'm like, well, duh, that's like the whole thing. That's the characters have to work through conflict. I didn't feel that way about this book. I felt like there was so much miscommunication in this fling relationship. What do they call these types of relationships? Like on again, off again relationship. They're in college. I think I've just aged out of the college level romance, aside from maybe like sports romance. Even then, I think I've aged out of it. I myself am years out of college, and so I just really couldn't relate to these characters and the sorority fraternity life, the on again, off again thing, and I didn't enjoy it. Sorry. But on the other hand, we had my most favorite book of the year, or not year, but up there definitely, for March at least, was No Matter What by Cara Bastone. I will die on the hill that Cara Bastone is now one of my favorite authors alongside people like Emily Henry for the romance genre. I am obsessed. I've read 3 of Cara Bastone's books and they were all 4 or 5 stars. I think 2 of them were 5 stars, 1 of them was a 4-star. I'm obsessed with everything she is writing so far. Will continue to keep them on my list of authors to pick up across the years, and I especially love that for No Matter matter what, you follow characters who are already married. And in the romance genre, that's a hard thing to write about, and this was the perfect book for me. Some other notable mentions of March: I read and finished the Rebel Witch book, which was part of a series, I can't remember the name, Heartless Hunter. Young adult, really wasn't a fan favorite, but I'm glad I read it. Haley Pham's first book came out in March, and I did read that. I had a 5-star in Dire Round and the Wolves of Ruin series. I've since picked up the second book in that series, you'll see later on, Chef's Kiss, and then another Abby Jimenez release, also an author I'm always gonna keep up with. We are flying through these, or at least it feels like I'm flying through them. I don't know about you. April, we read, I think, 8 books, so April was a big reading month as well. I feel like every month I've read around 7 to 8 books or 6 to 8 books. My least favorite for April was The Deal by Elle Kennedy. There was a little bit of pressure to read this book from my coworkers as well in advance of Off Campus, the TV show, coming out. So I decided to finally pick up The Deal. It had been on my TBR for so long. I think 2 to 3 years I'd had it on my TBR. It is the first Elle Kennedy book I read, and I will say, again, I think I've aged out of this kind of romance, sports romance. Those who are in their college era, I just really didn't connect to our 2 main characters at all. In fact, I found our male main character to be quite abrasive. Now, I say that to say that I loved 8 Up, will continue to watch the Off-Campus TV show. Now, that's a different story. I much preferred the TV show. So I might be convinced when the next few seasons of that show release to go back to this series, but maybe not. And then for my favorite book of April, this one was a hard one because I had 2 5-stars, I believe. We went with The Best Worst Thing by Lauren Oakey as my favorite book of the month. I was recommended this as an emotional romance, and it did not let me down. 5 stars. Since then, I've picked up Lauren Oakey's new release as well, which you'll see. A bonus, The Best Worst Thing was on Kindle Unlimited, and I love using my Kindle Unlimited subscription so I don't have to pay more for books than I already am. I won't really get into the plot of The Best Worst Thing, but I do recommend that you go and pick it up. It feels like a spoiler to talk about the plot for this one for some reason. Go read it yourself. And then the honorable mention for another Cara Bastone book was Promise Me Sunshine. Again, I just told you about Cara Bastone. I would recommend. Some other books in here, Catherine Walsh I discovered is an author that I want to keep picking up. We read the In Her Own League book from Liz Tom Ford, the spinoff to the Windy City series I finished earlier in the year. I did really enjoy The Berry Pickers as a branch into discovering more of the fiction genre that I am day by day saying might be my favorite genre over romance, which was crazy for me. Love Wand also followed in that one, a very unique one. I love the cover of it as well. And then I really branched out with the reading challenge to read The Will of the Many. I do need some convincing to read the second book in the Hierarchy series. It was just a massive world building fantasy world that was really hard for me to keep turning the page, if I'm being honest. It was very interesting, but just a big book. I might revisit that when the 3rd book in the trilogy comes out years later. We've got 2 more months left of the year to cover so far, and we are into May already. May, I only read 6 books. And when I say only, that feels wrong because reading any amount of books is fabulous and amazing. You read at your own pace. My least favorite book in May was Red Rising. I started the Red Rising series because my boyfriend picked my reads for that week and he picked Red Rising. I felt like Red Rising was another one of those things in the point of view of a younger boy. The book felt very brutal and abrasive, and there was a lot of young men in there doing things that I wasn't expecting them to do, and because of that, it just wasn't my favorite book of the year. Down there with some of my least favorites. I am glad I read it because I feel like I'm in the end, like everyone knows about this series. Everyone on the internet in the bookish world talks about this series, and I wanted to also be a part of it and read it. One of my other coworkers really loves it. It's like their favorite series ever. It just didn't hit the spot for me. Again, out of my comfort genre. I think it's science fiction or fantasy. I might pick up another book in the series if it happened to be as a part of a challenge for some reason. I do have them on my shelf from where my boyfriend read them, so we'll see. My favorite book from May was Into the Blue by Emma Brody. You have definitely seen this cover. If you're watching this video, it's probably because you have books on your algorithm that I also have on my algorithm, and Into the Blue was one of those. It is all over the internet. It came out, I think, back in April, and it was just about a month of me seeing it all over my For You page that I said, okay, I'll finally pick this up. I'm glad I did. I gave it a 5 stars. I had read the blurb of this book before it became very popular. I'd seen it at my local bookstore, and I just didn't think the blurb sounded interesting to me. I think I remember reading about SNL in the blurb and it being a romance story. Really didn't catch my eye. I'm so glad I took people's recommendations. 5 stars. I know some other people don't feel that way about it, but hey, I recommend it. Other notable things from May, I read my first Stephen King book, The Institute. I will certainly pick up more Stephen King after that. Phoebe Berman's Gonna Lose It, such a fun book by Brooke Averick, their debut novel. We also read Our Perfect Storm. I was continuing to read some of Carly Fortune's new releases, and then I read a new release in Furybound. I picked that up immediately when it came out to continue the Wolves of Ruin series after a 5-star on the first book in the series. I will be finishing that once the final, I think, trilogy book is released. This is the point in the video where my throat hurts and I keep swallowing because I'm talking so much and I'm not used to it. For the final month, which is the month I'm currently in and about to exit, we are in June now, and we'll start out with my least favorite book of June. This one was honestly the hardest month to pick because I had a lot of books that I rated a 3.5 stars, and so they were, to me, a 3.5 stars, still a great rating for myself. They were all good books. I just couldn't differentiate them as being my favorite books or profound or things that I might remember. So I landed on The Perks of Being a Wallflower, my least favorite book of the month. I read this because I did a challenge where I read banned books or commonly banned books or challenged books in America, and that was The Perks of Being a Wallflower and The Handmaid's Tale. I think that most people have probably read this book 10 years ago. I was a little bit behind on this. I also had never watched the movie, still haven't watched the movie, so it felt like I had maybe aged out a little bit of the sentiments as you follow someone who is in middle school and younger high school aged, but I really did still appreciate the topics of mental health and the conversation working through trauma and grief. It just wasn't my favorite book of the month, honestly. My favorite book of the month was so far one of my most interesting read books this year, if not the most interesting book, and that was Yesteryear by Caro Clairberg. I feel like Yesteryear came out at the same time that Into the Blue came out, but Yesteryear is also all over my For You page. I was seeing it everywhere. I was hearing people talk about it, saying if you were an influencer, if you make content, if you're on the internet, you would probably want to read Yesteryear. I'm so glad I did. I think I gave it a 4.5 stars. It might even be a 5 stars. This was a page turner. I read this book in like under 2 days, which was a very fast-paced book for me, and I did not guess the plot. I did not guess the ending. I was so thrown off. I think that everyone's right. If you are on the internet at all, take in any type of content, you might find this book fascinating. It's also very satirical, so you could find it offensive, and I think that that's a fun thing to read because it really gets you thinking. Some other honorable mentions for June: we read another Kristen Hanna book, another Lauren Oakey book, which we talked about. I picked up more books in the Western romance Rebel Blue Ranch series, as well as the Undone Hockey Romance series. Oh, Sarah DeMoff. I just finished this literally a few days ago. The Burning Side by Sarah DeMoff. That would have been my second favorite book of June. If you like fiction, pick up a Sarah DeMoff book. Very emotional, very sad, very heavy, but you won't regret it. That wraps it up for least, most, and all the in-between for all the books I've read so far in 2026. If you've read any of these books, where did we differ in opinion, or were we similar in opinions on them? Again, I love reading. It is very subjective. It's very fun. It's good to stay curious about what you read. It's different from person to person, genre preferences, all of the in-between. So just go pick up a book if you can. Go to your local library or use your eLibby. I think that's all I got. Bye for now.